read every day.
At least once a day, and often more than that. I have a news application on my phone, so quite often I'm just having a overview of what's going on.
I have my wireless, my radio every day going from morning till evening, which is P1, a program containing cultural and things, also concerning news. This is my main source of information, and I keep one Sunday paper.
I don't listen to the news more than maybe 2 times a week, but I read newspapers online on a daily basis.
Quite often. I'm very interested in news and world events.
Impression not as much anymore, but some month ago it was very present. It was, I think, the top story.
I think it has almost stopped appearing in the media, as far as I'm concerned, because it has it seems to have no interest. Only yesterday it was compared to something else, so it was mentioned, but that was, as an example. It wasn't because it was interesting to hear about Ukraine. I think, it's an old story now.
Not that often anymore. Like several years or a couple of years ago, when the crisis just developed on the Crimea Peninsula, there was a lot about it in the Danish media, but the last couple of years, not much.
Once, twice a week, I don't know.
As far as I know, it hasn't appeared in several months.
Not so much right now. A couple years ago, when the invasion happened, then it was very much, but not very much right now.
I think it would be very beneficial for everybody that Ukraine joined the European Union, and it's been very beneficial for the other countries, Romania and Bulgaria, and the more people that are included in the EU, the fewer wars there are, because since the European Union started, there's been no need to war, because you start trading with each other, and trade stops war.
European direction?
I think so, because Europe, EU is fighting or working towards democracy and developing other countries into democracy. So I think it would be a good deal for Ukraine, but also for EU to develop a tighter relationship, and maybe in a couple of years that Ukraine could be a part of the EU.
If Ukraine is fighting for democracy, and that's the idea of the European Union as well. So then they're fighting for the same thing. Yes.
Yeah, I think they should. Absolutely. I think all of Europe should cooperate more. My impression is not that it's a civil war. I think it's aggression from Russia.
If it's so simple, I'd say the last, but I'm not sure, because I don't know much about it. But I don't see it as a civil war.
I believe it's a war between Russia and Ukraine.
As far as I know, it's probably more. In many ways, I see it as a war between Ukraine and Russia. That's the picture I have, but I don't know that much about the conflict. So, but in my opinion, it's more about the two countries. Yeah.
Russia and Ukraine.
Oh, it's absolutely Russia trying to dominate the region. There's a lot of history with the Russians and the Soviet Union trying to very long history. Yeah, actually, and that's a very good question. I'm from Canada originally, and and everybody in Canada except for the indigenous people are immigrants or of immigrant families, including the Ukraine. And there's also Danes in Canada there throughout history. And usually people that immigrate or have the strength and the health and the mental ability to emigrate to another country, they're usually the best of the best quality people. They usually because they have the strength to leave the country. And therefore are also good people to have as immigrants because they're hardworking and want to do something. It's not usually old people that have the strength to leave a country because it's difficult. I know it as a Canadian moving to Denmark. It's difficult to leave your country, even by choice.
Of course, like the more diversity we have and the different cultures, that's how you get peace.
No, I think anybody who comes to Denmark who wants to be a part of the society should be accepted.
Not at all. I worked with refugees the last 7 years, so I also have a big understanding of why people are leaving their home countries for many reasons. And I think that those countries that has a strong economy and can afford to help is obligated to help as many people as possible. So I also think the diversity of like a multicultural and multi-ethnic planet is that will cause less conflicts in our future, I hope.
I would sure like it needs to continue and it needs to be controlled. And I think that was a bit of a Russian person that was in charge of the Ukrainian economy, the EU person that had to leave about a year and a half ago. I think that was a big mistake. He'd given up. It was the anti-corruption guy.
If NATO went in and said,
it just shows how much corruption there is when
part of NATO,
he gives up,
and Russia would have to accept it.
But corruption is very anti-democratic. And it also makes the poor poorer and the rich richer. And it needs to change. So having a strong institution of the European Union coming in and controlling spending and supporting people. I have a Ukrainian friend that just got married 2 weeks ago to a Dane. And there's lots of people that are forced to leave their country. And in reality, you should only need to leave by choice and not because of wars and economic situations. So it's important that money goes into Ukraine and support democracy with strings attached. The money has to be controlled and it has to be put into good projects.
Like if we are a country where we can afford to help, I think we should. I don't know how much Denmark actually are contributing, but I think that it's also a signal that Denmark and the Western European countries are helping. So I think it's a good thing, but I don't know how much actually we are helping.
Yeah, I think it's a worthwhile cause. Like Denmark also wants democracy in the world and other countries to have that opportunity. So it is good that Denmark supports that.
It absolutely makes sense, and it probably doesn't work. But something has to be done, and one day Putin, this is his last term, so we'll see if he'll run again for the 5th time at some point.
Yeah, I think so.
I'm pretty confident it works. Yeah, we should do that as much as we can. I would prefer if we could, if we could solve it diplomatically without sanctions. But I believe Putin is a tough negotiator, so we shouldn't be afraid to use muscle.
Compared to warlike aggressions, I prefer economic sanctions, but I'm not sure they have the effect that's wanted.
I think it makes sense. Like it's a strong political power or weapon, you can say that to put that on those countries. In this case, Russia. So I think it helps.
Yeah, of course.
I think so. Yeah.
Yes, but referring to my answer 10 minutes ago, I think it's not this, for the time being, it's not likely, and I think it's not the right time to be.
Yeah, but I think it takes a lot of stabilization in the country, culturally and economically. So I'd say not before 5, 6, 10 years would be realistic.
It's a political statement, and if you have a country that doesn't agree with something another country is doing, one way to make that a political statement is to do these sanctions, and I think it helps, and it definitely makes sense.
Absolutely, and it should also become a part of NATO, because that would create an environment where there's no wars. If you look at the European Union and look at all the neighboring countries, Tunisia, Algeria, Egypt, Israel, Turkey, and so on and so on and so on, there's wars or conflicts in all those countries around Europe. But in Europe, all those wars like the Balkans and between Germany and France or whatever, those wars are gone because you have open borders and trade. Trade, you don't go to war with the people you're doing business with.
Yeah, I think it's quite worrying. Yeah, I think, and it's you might see it as a result of very radical times, very right-wing politician winds blowing, and it's very. I'm very concerned about that. I'm worried about what will these consequences, what will the consequences be of these more individualistic ways of thinking.
I don't think the EU is falling apart. I think it's. I think perhaps the Britons were very. It was only a little more than 50% of the Britons, so I think it might as well not have been a Brexit. So it's. I don't think it's going that way.
I think we have seen a tendency in Europe the last couple of years that some countries are going to be more like nationalistic thinking instead of looking at the bigger picture and the partnerships in EU. So we're seeing, including Denmark, we're seeing that you go a little bit towards a less socialistic thinking in some of the European countries. And in my opinion, that's the wrong way. But I also think that it always goes like in waves, ups and downs. So it's a balance. So my hope is that we in the future will see that we go a little bit back towards to be more socialistic in thinking in the whole Europe.
Yeah, but I think also the European Union has a lot of work ahead of them right now. A lot of our countries, or a lot of the European Union, a lot of the countries within are becoming more nationalistic, and that's the whole idea of the European Union, was to bring everybody together. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done to regain that. Of course, it creates a different challenge, and yeah, I mean, it's constantly changing what the European Union is, and we have to find out what works. And if you don't have as much money coming in from other countries, then you have to find out how it can support.
Yeah, well, and it has been. I mean, the inclusion of Poland and Hungary and the Baltic states. I was in Lithuania last year, and it was very important. I was at a parade where the NATO troops were doing a parade on their National Day, And people came up to my friend who was a Canadian officer, and said many people came up to him and said, thank you so much for being here, because the Canadians are there, and the Danes, and the Poles, and many other countries are there to protect a NATO country from an eventual invasion by Russians. And so the Russian problem is still a real problem, and it's a shame, because in reality Russia should just also be a partner in the peace of Europe.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, I would.
Yes.
Yeah, I think I don't know enough about Ukraine to I don't know if it's close enough on the humanitarian aspects, but I think we should go towards including Ukraine. Absolutely.
I don't know. I don't know much. Not so much. I don't know so much about it. So I don't know. I can't answer that question. Sorry.
For purpose, you don't reach this goal you have put to yourself, then it's not enough. But I can't say how much, in what way.
That's beyond my knowledge.
That's hard to say. Like, I don't have a ton of knowledge or information about exactly what it is that's going on. But there's always a use for more money and more involvement.
I think it's not enough, not even close to being enough. If we want to avoid this conflict, I think we have to invest a lot more.
Well, there should be more. There's a lot more support for the Ukraine in terms of also working and assisting with people also coming out of the country, learning languages, learning countries where there's little corruption like there is here. I mean, every country has corruption, but it's also important to show people that there's actually other ways of doing things where people are happy and have a successful lifestyle. And so inclusion is the answer and not exclusion.
Generally, I'm not that keen into military support. I think the world has an idea of that support is something that's military. I don't like it. I think you should support in a more democratic, parliamentary way instead of military. But if that's the only possible solution, then it's better than nothing.
I don't believe in military support.
Could be. Again, I don't know that much about it, but I mean, if there's people like refugees leaving from the area because of like the conflict, civilian war, or the conflict between Ukraine and Russia, it could maybe be a solution to have a peacekeeping mission. It'll help other places, but again, it's a balance. Can you fight a war with another war, or can so it's a very big political question to answer, and I don't know. I just know that it has helped in other conflicts, like Balkan is a good example on where peacekeeping missions helped out and is still helping out. So it could maybe.
In some ways, that's a very difficult. It's not a black and white answer, but yeah, in some ways, Russia needs basically to pull out, and that's not going to be easy for Putin either. So it's if NATO went in and said and Ukraine became part of NATO, then Russia would have to accept it.
Hard to say. Often you get military involvement, and then peace troops come in afterwards. I don't know. I don't know if that's the solution.
I'm afraid there is not that I think that we should actively fight, because I don't think it solves anything, but I think we should demonstrate the willingness to be present, because if we are not, then Putin is going to take anything he can. That's a good idea. I think, like a Danish meat shield between Russia and Ukraine Putin wouldn't want to strike anyone from Denmark. I'm pretty sure that would be too much of a risk.
I never thought of that, but I think generally peacekeepers should be everywhere.